First of all, let us begin our session today with the recitation of Furqan Al-Fatiha. Okay, I welcome all participants today who are joining us in the Zoom meeting, and I believe we also will have some participants through the Istac TV. So we have today as our speaker, Associate Professor Dr. Mohamad Nasir, who will be sharing with us on the topic a brief exposition on some issues connected to mental health. A brief introduction about our speaker today. So Dr. Mohamad Nasrin obtained his bachelor degree in Brunel University. He then pursued his master's degree in Islamic Studies at Central Middlesex University, and he then obtained his PhD in Islamic Thought at Istac-Iium. Before we start our session today, so to all our audience, I would like to remind you that if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to drop your comment in the chat box, or you may also ask directly to the speaker at the end of the session. So I think our speaker is ready, right? So I would like to invite our speaker, Dr. Mohamad Nasrin, to begin his sharing. فليتفضل مشكورا ومأجورا.
Okay. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.
Okay, so you can hear me. Okay, can you see the screen that I shared?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Very good. Thank you very much, Sister Akma Mariani, for the introduction. Today's lecture, I wouldn't call it a lecture. It's more of like a sharing session because of my field is not psychology, nor is it psychiatry. My field is Islamic studies, specifically metaphysics and philosophy. That's my field, which I have written for the last 20 years and presented at various conferences overseas. So they suddenly called me last week and told me that whether I can come and share with the students in regards to some issues on mental health. So this is a week's preparation of slides, so I hope I will not be judged too much because of the lack of slides that are here. It's more of a sharing session, I would say, more of a giving awareness to students in regards to mental health and mental health disorders, and what are the prevalent approaches in the field at the moment, as well as there could be some connections with our Islamic traditions if we look at the issue of mental disorders. Okay, so without wasting anybody's time, they told me I have 30 to 40 minutes to spend to explain, to raise awareness. So I will begin now. If I can just change my slide. Okay. Now I can't read it. Okay, let me move this. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's it. So the agenda today is definition of mental health, the issues, mental disorders, sustenance of the soul, hormones, and the end. Yeah. So definition of mental health. Most of the time when we talk about mental health, people often think about mental disorders. It's actually mental health. Mental health is actually, if it's defined as a state of mental well-being that enables people to cope with the stresses of life, to realize their abilities to learn well, work well, and to contribute to their communities. So as you have physical health, which will help you move from one place to another, and coping with the daily stresses of life, that is the aspect of mental health. That is the aspect of mental health. So It is an intrinsic and instrumental to the lives of all people, of course. As you have the physical body, you also have the mental, health that you have to think of. You have physical health, you have the mental health. So that is what is being discussed in today's approach to medicine. It underpins our ability to make decisions, build relationships, and shape the world we live in. So how we relate to others, how we talk to others, how we connect to others, how we are in a group, those shows to us our mental health, our mental well-being. So our mental health is, of course, as important as our physical health. When we have mental health, we can cope with the stresses of life. And life is full of stresses. Realize our own abilities, learn and work well, and contribute actively to our communities. Mental health is also a basic human right, meaning people should not be, not allowed to practice their mental health at all. They should be allowed to exercise their mental health, go to a doctor if they choose to, because it's part of their human rights. And it is crucial to personal, not only yourself, but to your community and socio-economic development, of course. So mental health, if you look at this picture here, has intrinsic and instrumental value, helping us to connect, function, cope, and thrive. So connect meaning have positive relationships, contribute to communities, because you have positive relationship, of course, you are able to connect with people. You get a sense of belonging, you understand where you are in the society, you empathize with others. Now, empathy is what I want to mention at the end, just another part which I want to mention at the end. So we'll leave it at that. Function, you apply cognitive skills. Cognitive skills meaning skills that enable you to make decisions in your life. Things that enable you to, the skills that enable you to make a choice, to choose, to make a judgment. That's cognitive. Gain an education, earn a living, make healthy choices, learn new skills. If you have mental health, you can connect, you can function, meaning you can go forward in your life. You can apply cognitive skills, you can study, etc. And you can cope. Of course, you can cope with the stresses that are coming to you. Stresses that are coming to you might come from different angles, different ways, right? Stresses that are connected to you have to find more money, you have to find more funds. Stresses that are connected to you have to find more time to finish your assignments. Stresses that have something to do with, you have to find friends, you have to connect with friends because you have to fulfill a group work. Some people have problem with this. Yeah. So some people might seem to have mental health, but they cannot cope. So in other words, they have a problem. So they can adopt new ideas, make complex choices, understand and manage emotions. Sometimes people, they look as if they are okay, but they cannot manage their emotions. They cry in front of public, loudly. They cannot control their emotions. They get angry very easily. They cannot, control and, be in control all the time. This shows they have a problem. Yeah. And they can thrive. If you have mental health, you can thrive. Of course, once you get connected, you can function, you can cope, and of course, you can thrive. That you realize your own abilities, you feel good, you find purpose in your life, and you think about our well-being and that of others. Now, this mental health can be on a single individual, or it might be on a single individual or married individual, a person, an individual who have community. Yeah. So it's very important. So mental illness or disorder, then if you understand mental health, then we can go into mental illness or disorder. In America itself, there are 43.7 million adults with mental illness. And this is 2012. This is before COVID-19 pandemic, right? Now, according to WHO, right, there are more than 450 million people who are affected by mental disorders. But that is the data for 2016. The WHO estimates that 1 in 4 people will be affected by a mental disorder in their life. After the pandemic, 2022, WHO estimates the number of people affected by mental disorders to reach 1 billion people. 1 billion. The population of China is 1.6 billion, right? 1.6 billion. So 1 billion is like 3/4 of China already. Yeah, to give an example of how you can think about it, right? So there's a lot of people who are affected by mental disorders, especially after the pandemic. Especially during the pandemic, they got it. Then after the pandemic, they've been diagnosed, etc. What is a mental disorder? So a mental disorder, if you look at the definition, is a syndrome that is characterized by clinically significant disturbance in an individual's cognition, emotional regulation, or behavior that reflects a dysfunction in the psychological, biological, or developmental processes that underlie mental and behavioral functioning. These disturbances are usually associated with distress or impairment in personal, family, social, educational, occupational, or other important areas of functioning. What does this mean? In layman's terms, a person who has a mental disorder, he is a disturbed individual, right? A disturbed individual, and he is in a state of dysfunction, meaning he cannot function properly. He cannot function properly. He has a problem psychological and also biological. This is also interesting, right? So it's not only the mental health that is affected, but also his physical health that is affected, right? Physical health. And also developmental processes, right? Developmental processes that underlie the mental and behavior of the person. So he cannot function properly. So if you look at a person, or if you see your friend around you who keeps quiet more than a day, he or she has a problem, right? He or she has a problem, and you have to try and find out what it is in order to help. Yeah. So I put here some of the mental disorders or illnesses that are here, right? You have anxiety, depression, PTSD, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder. These are all disorders which I will go through, with you slowly to explain. I think a lot of you are already aware, right? Are already aware, but sometimes you're not sure whether what you have or what your friend have, or what your relative have, or what your family have might be a mental disorder, or is it just something that is temporary, right? A mental disorder takes time, right? Takes time, as you will see, right? So, first of all, the anxiety disorder, and this I think most easily for us to relate to, right? Anxiety disorders are characterized by excessive fear, meaning you're always really, really afraid, right? And worry, and related behavioral disturbances. Symptoms are severe enough to result in significant distress or significant impairment in functioning. Meaning, fear, there is too much on the person that he is unable to move, right? He is frozen by fear, in a sense. That's the word that they always say, right? Frozen by fear. He can't move because he's so afraid, right? And there are several kinds of anxiety disorders, such as generalized anxiety disorder, which is excessive worry, meaning someone who is constantly worrying about the future. Yeah. Panic disorder, characterized by panic attacks, somebody that is sometimes having panic attacks, right? Panic attacks, this is also sometimes it can happen, but we are not sure how it happens, right? Science is unclear about how panic attack happens, but it creates certain things in our body. For some people, panic attack might appear in the sense of the heart palpitating, palpitating quite a lot, goes until 130, 140, 150, beats per minute. That is a panic attack too, So it could be because of your heart problem, or it could be a panic attack. This you have to check with a doctor. Sometimes you go to the doctor checks your physical body, and see, well, there's nothing pathological wrong with you, meaning physically, there's no problem with you. But there is something, a problem in your psychology. Yeah, there is something, a problem in your mind. So sometimes these things happen, right? Panic attack. Social anxiety disorder, sometimes excessive fear and worry in social situations. So such individual is always afraid of going to join groups or doing group works or presenting in front of groups or a lot of people. They have like anxiety. So that is social anxiety disorder, right? And I've met few students who are like this. When I ask them to present, they say, please sir, I cannot present, I have mental problem. So I understand. So it's okay, right? They don't have to present, they ask someone else to present in the group. But this happens, right? This happens. Separation anxiety disorder. Sometimes people are excessive fear of separation from someone, separation from individuals to whom the person has a deep emotional bond, meaning he's afraid, he's going to lose his child, he's afraid he's going to lose his parents, he's afraid of going to lose his wife, afraid of all these things. These are all, separation anxiety disorder, right? And others. So anxiety disorder is mainly the disorder that creates a kind of fear in the person, in the student, okay, that causes the person or the student not able to act, not able to move. So it causes a dysfunction in their movement. So they cannot move, right? They cannot move, they cannot do things, right? So that's one. The second one, this is I think also a lot of people know, is depression. I think a lot of people know this, right? A lot of people know this, and it's become like a buzzword. Sorry sir, I'm depressed today, etc. You get this when you teach, students, a lot of students in one class, right? Undergraduates, but I don't mean undergraduates only, have depression. Sometimes postgraduate also, right? So depression is different from the usual mood fluctuations and short-lived emotional responses to challenges in everyday life. So during a depressive episode, the person experiences depressed mood. So he feels sad, irritable, empty, or a loss of pleasure or interest in activities for most of the day, nearly every day for at least 2 weeks, right? So here the point is that person loses interest in everything. The person loses interest in everything that usually cause him pleasure. Like for example, it normally cause him pleasure to watch, Netflix or, to go out with his friends. But now, if you ask him when he's in a state of depression, he doesn't have that feeling at all. To him, going out with his friends and staying at home as he is the same. That is a state of depression. He doesn't feel any pleasure whatsoever. You switch open the TV, he doesn't feel it. You open a joke that you can watch on TV, stand-up comedy on TV, he will not feel it. He's just with a blank space. He just stares far ahead. If you're standing in front of him, he's staring right through you. Yeah, he's staring right through you. Several other symptoms are also present, which may include poor concentration, feelings of excessive guilt. So sometimes he has feelings of excessive guilt, low self-worth, hopelessness about the future, and thoughts about dying or suicide. Yeah, disrupted sleep, changes in appetite, doesn't want to eat too much or wait, and feeling especially tired or low in energy. Yeah, and also, of course, it's not mentioned here, is that the person will have also sometimes anxiety attacks. Yeah, if he has a depression, he will have sometimes anxiety attacks. So you would see sometimes people who have depression, some type of people who have depression, they would like to just, you know, stay under the mattress, stay under the selimut only. Duduk bawah selimut, tak berani nak keluar. Yes, because they are afraid of the world outside. That is a state of depression. If it goes for 2 weeks, so always remember all these disorders. If it goes for more than 2 weeks, right? 2 weeks, then you have a problem. You have a mental disorder. If it comes and goes also for 2 weeks, so today you're okay, tomorrow suddenly you have depression attacks, the next day suddenly you have anxiety attacks, and then the fourth day you're okay, and then suddenly next week you also have again. So after 2 weeks you still have these, intermittent attacks, right? Go and see a doctor or go and see a counselor. You have a problem. Yeah, there is something has happened in your brain. Yeah. Now, the other one is post-traumatic stress disorder. Now, this one happens because of a certain accident or incident in the life of a person, right? So, the PTSD, in short, may develop following exposure to an extremely threatening or horrific event or series of events. It's characterized by all of the following. So, re-experiencing of traumatic events, the present. So, sometimes the trauma happened and he keeps on reliving it, re-experiencing it. It keeps coming up in his dreams. It keeps coming up suddenly during the day. It comes up, in front of his eyes. This is coming from the brain. This is coming from the brain. This is why he's having this, right? Post-traumatic stress disorder. So avoidance of thoughts and memories of the events, or avoidance of activities, situations, or people reminiscent of the events, persistent perceptions of heightened current threat. So he's suddenly being afraid because, he might come to me, etc. These different disorders are only able to be, to be diagnosed by a proper diagnostician. And the proper diagnostician is the psychiatrist or the psychologist. Yeah, go and see them. Don't come and see me. Huh? Don't come and Istac. Oh, Dr. Nasrin, you gave a talk the other day. Come and see me. No. Go and see the psychiatrist and psychologist. Right? So I'm just raising the awareness. How you would know whether you have PTSD or whether you have depression or whether you have anxiety disorder, they will be able to conduct certain tests on you, right? They'll be able to conduct certain tests on you before that, right? So next one is schizophrenia. Now, schizophrenia is characterized by significant impairments in perception and changes in behavior. Sometimes, they include persistent delusions, hallucinations, disorganized thinking, highly disorganized behavior, or extreme agitation, extreme agitation, agitate, right? So persistent delusions, meaning he's constantly believing there's this big conspiracy against him or whatever. That's delusional, right? Or he's constantly believing there is a jinn behind this door who's always coming to disturb me. Sometimes it might be true, but most of the time it's not. Right? Most of the times is something has happened in his brain that causes him this. And this is what, a diagnostician would call schizophrenia, right? And he has disorganized behavior. They may experience persistent difficulties with their cognitive functioning, meaning they are not able to decide properly. They move from one thing to another, right, without thinking properly because they have this problem. And the last one is the bipolar disorder. Now, this is more really unique if compared to that schizophrenia, right? Because here you have someone who's alternating between depressive episodes with periods of manic symptoms. So during a depressive episode, the person experiences depressed mood, feeling sad, irritable, empty, or loss of pleasure or interest in activities for most of the day, nearly every day. And then suddenly, he has manic symptoms. Manic symptoms include euphoria. Euphoria meaning intense happiness. Suddenly he's, I'm so happy today. What are we going to do? Let's go with me. Let's go out. I'll treat you to food. Suddenly. And then tomorrow, suddenly depressed. If you know a friend like this, every day like this for 2 weeks, that's a problem, right? There's a problem somewhere. Okay? Yeah. Increased activity or energy and other symptoms such as increased talkativeness, talks doesn't stop, racing thoughts, increased self-esteem, decreased need for sleep, distractibility, and impulsive, reckless behavior. People with bipolar disorder are at an increased risk of suicide. So this is the problem, right? Some of these disorders here might lead people to suicide, right? Might lead people to suicide. So this is the why mental health is so important for us to care and look at, and and really understand ourselves in regards to what are the main disorders, so that we can actually diagnose ourselves and see whether we have this, right? Or if someone who have this, right? So cognitive therapy and the emotional disorders, psychological problems are not necessarily the product of mysterious, impenetrable forces, as Freud says, but may result from commonplace processes such as faulty learning, making incorrect inferences on the basis of inadequate or incorrect information, and not distinguishing adequately between imagination and reality. So this is said by a psychologist in the field in her book Cognitive Therapy and the Emotional Disorders. To her, psychological problems sometimes happen, not because of something that is outside, but something that is inside. The person looks at the world and makes a wrong judgment or makes a wrong perception that causes his mind to think in a wrong way, thus causing him to not knowing which one is imagination and which one is reality, right? So sometimes this happen. Sometimes this happen. But as I said just now, the other reason why people get disorders is because of the uh, brain, of the brain itself. This is what our diagnosticians are talking about nowadays. Brain chemicals and mental illness. If you look at this slide here, you have too much of glutamate that we have in our food, that we consume, might cause sometimes might cause autism, might cause OCD. I didn't talk about this, obsessive compulsive disorder. I did not talk about autism, but I did talk about schizophrenia, right? And I did talk about depression. So sometimes the increase of glutamate in the body, that you consume too much of glutamate, it might creates this kind of imbalance in the brain, right? Might create a kind of imbalance in the brain. And what scientists say about the brain nowadays is that if you look at this slide here, we show the brain for each and every one of us. We have what we call here the front part of the brain is called the prefrontal cortex, right? The prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex is where you analyze and control emotions, right? Control emotions. And you make judgments and you control your emotions, and basically you make your cognitive decisions there, the prefrontal cortex. According to scientists, up till now, the prefrontal cortex only stops to develops once you are born, of course, as you grow up, but it only stop developing, or it has achieved its mature growth when you reach 25 years old. The prefrontal cortex, it's like a computer that we use to make our decisions, and it stops, how do I say, like a computer, it stops getting new things to be downloaded, right? It becomes a perfect computer once you reach 25 years old. That's why people who are younger than 25 years old, sometimes they might make good decisions, sometimes they might make wrong decisions because of their disability in their prefrontal cortex. This is what science is saying today, right? And also sometimes they are not able to control their emotions. That's why young people are more prone to violence, right? They tend to fight a lot more, right, with their friends, just on small matter, right? Now, if you look also at this picture of the brain, right? If I can show you, where's my, okay, yeah. And then, there's the arrow, right? If you look at that yellow thing, that's called the amygdala. Yeah, that is called the amygdala. Now, the amygdala is a place where, according to scientists, the amygdala is where you have that anxiety. Yes, the anxiety and the fear that you have in your life comes from the amygdala, right? So when your prefrontal cortex tell the brain that this is something for you to be fearful of, the amygdala gives out, okay, uh, gives out electrons to other parts of the brain, so that you become fearful, etc. So this is how it works in very very brief I don't want to go too much into this because it's not my field. But what I've read and what I've done my research on, this is what they say to us today. That's why now, when people do, when people do research on psychiatry and psychology, they use the machine to look at your brain. So using the PET scan or the scanner or the MRI, etc. Right? The CAT scan. They put the electrodes on your head, and then when they give you to listen to music, they can look at the screen and see which part of your brain is happy. Then you can see lights coming up at the prefrontal cortex. You can see it coming up on the right, coming up on the left, things like that. When they show you a picture of fear of something scary like a ghost or something, something else lights up in your brain. So this they can do, and that's what they are doing now in order to understand the brain, right? To understand the brain and how it functions. But this is still all, still very much that, that still needs to be studied. Yeah. So we have looked at that. What I've given just now is basically, a short, a very brief explanation about mental health and also mental disorders, and a bit about how the brain functions, right? A bit about how the brain functions in a sense, yeah? So now I'm going to go into what do we have in our own tradition, right? What do we have in our own tradition in Islamic thought? Well, in Islamic thought, if you look, the discussion is mainly about the body and the soul, right? The body and the soul. In all Islamic thought books, written by our former scientists, right? So I've got here a book, Masalih al-Abdan wal-Anfus. Yeah, if roughly translated as sustenance of the bodies and the souls. So food for the body and the souls, by Abu Zayd Ahmad ibn Sahal al-Balakhi. Is one of the most interesting texts that have been uncovered regarding psychology in our Muslim tradition, right? And he was a philosopher who had written about 60 works that are available under his name. If you look at the list of works that have been written by him, there are around 60 works. Unfortunately, a lot of them are lost to us, that we are not able to read them today. But we are lucky that we have this book here, Masalih al-Abdan wal-Anfus, sustenance of the bodies and of the souls, that we are able to see, and we're able to see his only contribution to medicine and what he says about about psychology and how does he approach it. And according to Professor Malik Badri, some of you know Professor Malik Badri, the late Professor Malik Badri, who was also a professor at Istac before, during my time when I was studying in Istac 2002. He was a professor in psychology, and he edited this book, which was, I think, attained Hello? Hello? Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, something happened just now. Can you still see the screen, or
Uh,
the screen is gone, right?
it's not there, yes.
Okay, let me open it again. Okay, let me open it again. Yeah. Okay, now can you see it?
Yes, and now it's there.
Okay, now, yeah. So coming back to this, so it seeks the preservation of health this book in the human by giving simultaneous and comprehensive attention to both the body and the soul together with the diseases to which they are the subject, right? So this book is edited and published already. So I'm just taking just one small part of the book and try to show how it connects to our discussion today, right? So according to Abu Zayd al-Balkhi, he died in 322 or 934 of the Christian calendar that we have today. We start by saying that since man is composed of a body and soul, he is bound to face from each part of them fitness and weakness, health or sickness or other symptoms that afflict his health in a negative way, right? So the psychological symptoms such as anger, sorrow, fear, panic, and others. So in those days, he did not use the word depression. So he used the word anger, sorrow, huzun, yes, sorrow, fear, also huzun, right? Panic, right? So these are all anxiety attacks, right? So even in the 4th century, he had managed to see this going to be a problem that will affect the physical body. That will affect the physical body. The only difference is he sees it to be only in the soul, right? He sees it in the soul. Today's science tells us that it is in the brain, right? Because of the advancement of medicine from his time until now. So in the past, they saw it in the soul, but today, if they were alive, they would talk about the brain, right? But because there was no, experiment in those days in cutting the brain, etc., it was there, right? So Huzun, says Abu Zayd al-Balkhi, or sadness or depression is of two kinds, right? So we can translate huzun as sadness or depression, right? So this is what is been translated by Professor Malik Badri, the Muslim psychologist that we have before. The environmental causes for one of them is clearly known, such as the loss of a loved relative. You see, loss of a loved relative. So this is PTSD, right? Bankruptcy is a trauma also again, or loss of something the depressed person values greatly. So he sees depression from the loss of things, from a person being in a state of depressed once they lose things, right? So this was his observation in those days. But today's science basically says that you can get depression if the things in your brain are not balanced. Like, I gave the example just now of for example, the glutamate. There's an increase of glutamate in your brain that causes you not being able to control, right? The feeling of being depressed. And that is why if you go to see diagnostician, they will give you medicine in order to balance that. Yeah, this is what my own personal research that I've done in the past few weeks in reading, right? So you can ask this more of your diagnostician. Okay, so in those days, what was interesting is that he had identified that this loss, this trauma, might cause a person to fall into this state of depression. The other type has no known reasons, he says. This is interesting. So apart from that, you can experience depression because of loss, but also Abu Zayd says you can also experience depression because of a sudden affliction of sorrow and distress. The word distress is ghumma, which persists all the time, preventing the afflicted person from physical activity or from showing any happiness or enjoying any of the pleasures or shahwa. So he will not feel any pleasure in food or sex, right, if he's married, right? So he prevents it. So where does this come from? So this Abu Zayd does not manage to say, he says, no known reasons, he says. So today's science says this is because of what we eat and what is imbalanced also. Sometimes it can become imbalanced in our brain because of certain biological issue, right? Sometimes people are born with certain things in their brain, right? It's considered to be inherited genetically, right? This is another thing which I don't want to go into because it's not my field, it's too much, right? But there is this what they're saying. Is genetic. Sometimes you can inherit it from maybe your father, your great-grandfather, your grandfather, or whoever. right? It might come through that trait. So because mental health is still a new science now, right? It's new in the sense of the last, 40, 50 years, new in that sense, right? Uh, People have started to, slowly look at genetics and genes and see whether we have this before us. But because before us, it's just all physical health, right? Physical health. But maybe sometimes we have this. If you think about, that uncle who lived in the village, who always, people say a bit mad, who talks to himself a lot, walks around, and so on and so forth. Maybe he has a mental disorder, no? Following today's understanding of science, we will say, yeah, he has a mental disorder. Who is related to him, we try and find out, etc. So it's genetic, it's genetic. So the patient, according to Abu Zaid al-Balkhi, then does not know any clear reasons for his lack of activity and distress. He doesn't know why he's feeling depressed. He was okay yesterday. Suddenly today he's depressed. So this type of huzn or depression with no known reasons is caused by bodily symptoms, says Abu Zaid, such as impurity of the blood and other changes in it. So Abu Zaid says maybe it comes from impurity of the blood. Now this is talking about science during the time of Abu Zayd al-Balkhi in the 4th century. Now this type of science in his time, scientists in his time believe that we have 4 elements within us, right? We have 4 elements within us. If I can't really remember all of it, but it's the 4 biles, right? The black bile, the yellow bile, the gray bile, and I can't remember the 4th one, right? The 4 different biles that is within the individual, right? So it's all about maintaining a balance within our body that will give us health, bodily and mentally, according to Abu Zayd al-Balkhi. So its treatment, he says, is to purify the blood, because all these bile is not, is not, how to say, it's not balanced. So you have to purify it. Its treatment is a medical one which aims at purifying the blood. Yeah? So there is, what I want to bring from Abu Zayd al-Balkhi, which I thought was interesting, which I wanted to show you to say that even in Muslim understanding in the past, our scientists in the past, they have seen certain ideas that are akin to what we see today, right? This cause of depression that sometimes happen to people without having any reason whatsoever. So they try to explain it with the science that was there during their time, right? During their time. So today's science that has developed with, now we know about genes, genetics, DNA. We know about, the different, we can scan our brain and look at our brain. We can play music and one part of our brain is showing lights and here and there, etc. You can see that on the computer, can analyze the data. Of course, our understanding of science is going to be a lot more better than the people in the past, right? Now, sometimes mental health, we're going to go back into Abu Zayd al-Bakri towards the end later. So just a bit more. Sometimes people have a stigma in regards to mental health, right? Mental health stigma, right? And this causes people not to, want to open up that they have mental health. If they go and see a doctor, they tell the doctor, please don't tell my friends that I have this, right? So because my friend is after me, so please don't tell my friend. I don't want to be, labeled as gila or crazy or whatever, right? So mental health issue is a very sensitive subject. And according to WHO, because of the stigma that is connected to mental health, that's why a lot of people keep it under wraps and they don't want to talk about it until it is too late, until they're already at that top level of the building wanting to jump, wanting to commit suicide. So this is always very, very dangerous, right? Always very, very dangerous. So stigma, leave it, right? Leave it. What is most important is for you to get some, to learn about yourself, to understand your own, happiness, and to try and get, your mind healthy. So you have to let go of the stigma that people have. Yeah? So what are some of the tips that you can use? Yeah, some of the tips. This is the last part of the discussion here. What are some of the tips that you can use? So according to Abu Zaid al-Balkhi, quite interesting, 4th century, he says, help should be limited to bringing about happiness. So anything that brings about happiness and pleasure through friendly companionship, pleasant conversation, and other activities, joking around or playing games or whatever, which may stimulate the person. So stimulation happens in the brain. Stimulation, yeah, the person to reduce his agony, such as listening to music and songs. So even Abu Zaid say, why not? Listen to music and songs, as long as the person experience pleasure. So next time when you have depression or your friend have depression, try this. Try talking to them. Try listening to them. Yeah, not judging them. Oh, you kena semayang banyak, oh, you kena baca Quran. Not that is judging, right? Because you are saying that because you did not pray, you have not read the Quran, that's why you are depressed. Don't say that, right? Don't say that. That's not listening, that is judging, right? So instead, listen to them. Listen to their problems. Don't make judgments. Instead, create activities. Put on a music, put on a song, whatever, right? And see whether it works. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. If it works, very good. If it doesn't, you need more than that, right? As to see a doctor, yeah? So, this is what I took from a clinic, a local clinic, talking about the different hormones. This is in Malay, right? So I'm going to translate it here in English for those of you who can't read Malay. So this says that these hormones are the feel-good hormones. Dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphin. These are the feel-good hormones. Dopamine is you get from, doing meditation, listening to music, eating high-protein food. Oxytocin, the hormone of love. You hug your friend, hug your family member, hug a cat. Hug a cat. If you have cats around, hug a cat, right? Sometimes it works, right? Hug a rabbit, hug your hamster, hug a pet, right? Do good things to others. Do good things to others, right? It will increase the hormones of oxytocin, right? The hormone of love. Serotonin, by doing a lot of exercise, going outside, walking, not necessarily running, not necessarily going to the gym or whatever, just walking outside, getting fresh air, you get more serotonin, and eat food with, eggs, cheese, uh, you know, uh, uh, you know, pineapple, tauhu, you can eat all these things, right? And it will increase your serotonin, good mood. Your good mood will increase. Try and have it, every day or daily if you can. I know a lot of people like to eat tempeh. Yeah, it's not a bad idea to have tempeh with your nasi. Yeah. So, and also getting a lot of sunshine also is good. So if your room is dark, open the blinds and get some sunshine. It helps, right? It will increase your serotonin level. And of course, most important serotonin level increaser is chocolate. A lot of people do this, right? A lot of people do that. I see Sister Akma is smiling now. You do that too, sister. A lot of people like to eat chocolate. And, they say that, also a fun fact, a woman's serotonin level is half of a man. What does this mean? It means you can eat more chocolate than a man can. So Sister Akma, you can eat a lot more chocolate. Okay? So, you have also the hormone of endorphin, which is, withstanding pain. This endorphin comes from laughter, comes from aromatherapy, smelling, nice things in your nose, swimming, dancing, getting massages, and eating dark chocolate. They also give you endorphin, right? So the hormones are actually chemicals that coordinate different functions in your body. So by carrying messages through your blood to your organs, skins, muscles, and other tissues. And these signals tell your body what to do and when to do it. Hormones are essential for life and your health. The four important hormones, which I mentioned just now, they're connected to your emotions. They are feel-good hormones. Yeah, they're dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, and endorphin. They are called the feel-good hormones. So, final thoughts before we end. If you believe you have a mental health issue, please talk to your doctor, counselor, or go to SASMEC, right? When your friends are opening up, try to listen and be a good ear instead of judging and giving out prescriptions for life. You know, some people, they like to give prescriptions because they think they have done their PhD, so they can give you prescriptions for life. You did not ask for it. What you're asking is for a ear to listen to you. Most of the time, people are just asking that. When they are venting, when they are saying things, they just want to vent out. They just want to say things that people listen to them. Empathy is something that is needed in helping others. Empathy means to listen and to share their feelings. It is more active than just sympathy. Because a lot of us do sympathy. We don't do empathy. We sympathy, oh kesian, or pity that guy, you know, poor you, right? We do sympathy. But we don't have empathy. We don't want to listen, what's your problem? I feel the same way too. You know, that's empathize. That's empathizing with a person. You know, but this is what is missing. This is what is missing in our, you know, our communication with our friends. But this is what we have to inculcate. We have to do a lot more. We have to try and stop and listen to others. This is very, very important, right? So these are my final thoughts, and I thank you very much for listening, and I hope it's been useful for you. Thank you. Assalamualaikum.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi. Thank you very much, Dr. Nasrin, for the very insightful and informative awareness sharing. So I think we have one question here in the Zoom chat. If I can read, Assalamualaikum, Dr. Nasrin. As Muslims, should we consider Sufi practices as one of the methods in treating mental health, since it focuses more on spiritual aspects? Can Dr. Nasrin give?
Yeah, well, I don't know which part of Sufi practices that you are talking about, right? Sufi practices are mainly done by the individual in order to achieve the goals of Sufism. What is the goal of Sufism? The goal of Sufism is to reach God, to be in constant state of remembrance of God, to be in constant state of zikr. So it is remembering God, right? So Sufi practices such as dhikr is done by the person to achieve that remembrance of God, to remember God. So it's not to achieve or to overcome mental disorders. So it is mainly to achieve the goals of Sufism. So I'm not sure how that by remembering, you know, to achieve God, that you are able to overcome your mental disorder if you have a mental disorder in the first place. Most of the Sufi tariqat that I know, Sufi sheikh that I know, they normally look at a person and see that they are mentally stable first before they allow them to join and do a lot of zikr, you know, to achieve God. Because the aim of achieving God, the highest level of achieving God, is to forget about yourself, right? So in a sense, yes, you know, you forget about yourself, forget about this world, you only remember God, right? But when you come back to earth, once you finish that zikr, you still have the problem if you have mental disorder. So it doesn't solve mental disorder. You know, it is specific actions by Sufi practices are for a specific aim that is achieved by the Sufi teachings. I think that's, yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Nasrin. We have second question here. We have sometime here. From Nurul Shazwani, she asked, are these conditions, I think referring to the mental disorder, are newly discovered or they had happened long time ago?
Yeah, that's what I said. If you look at Abu Zaid al-Balkhi just now, in the 4th century, he died 322, right? Just now I wrote, right? So 4th century of Hijrah, which is in the 10th century of our time, he has always been there, right? It's always been there in human society. But new developments in knowledge allows human society to open up, to discuss and to analyze it from different aspects. So in a sense, you can say that, you know, there's always been depression since, you know, time immemorial. You can say that, right? So yeah, in that sense. There's someone raising their hands.
Yes, please welcome Sister Nahid Azhari.
Yeah, I tried to unmute my. Yeah,
Yeah,
thank
go
you.
ahead.
Yeah, thank you, the moderator, and also Dr. Nasrin. It's a very insightful, I think, sharing from Dr. Nasrin. I just maybe I just want to share some
Very good.
thoughts on the when you said that the Sufism. Actually, when we talk about mental health well-being, because I'm a mental health first aider, what do you call it? I'm already trained to be a mental health first aider. So when we speak about mental health well-being, it is actually covering all 4 components of a human being. We have a mental, and then we have mood, behavior, and also another one is our ruhani. So when the person, who's the name again? I'm so sorry. When you speak about Sufism, the spiritual part of human being, it covers only one component of us being a human. So it could not I think it could not what do you call it, menyelesaikan, handle or tackle the issues of mental health. So you have to look into all the other components as well. So these components are being taken care of in balance mode. If we look into Al-Ghazali's, also he mentioned also about this. When we are being in balance with all these components of being human being, then inshallah we will have mental wellness, mental health wellness, inshallah.
Okay, thank you very much for your sharing. Yeah.
Yes, thank you very much, Sister Nahid, for the sharing. I think, do you have any question from the floor, from participants in Zoom, and also, I think we don't have more, right? So for that, I would like to thank all of the participants, those who are joining us in the Zoom meeting, as well as following us live on the Istac TV. And also, not the least, our honorable speaker today, Associate Professor Dr. Mohamad Nasrin, for the very interesting and insightful sharing. And we hope that we can continue to see you all again in our next session. And with that, let us end our session today with the recitation of Tasbih Kafarah.